to Building Confidence in the Kitchen. My name is Todd Deck, and I am the Community Engagement Services Manager here at the Sacramento Public Library. And before we get into today's lesson, I did want to go over a little bit of housekeeping with everyone. So if you are having audio-related issues, please exit the program and re-enter. And if you need closed captioning, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. All participants' microphones and video have been disabled. If you have a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And today's recipe, there's a lot of moving parts and elements to it. So we will do our best to get to all of your questions, but we do have to be very mindful of time tonight. This program is going to be recorded, and we will share it to the Sacramento Public Library YouTube page. I did want to let everyone know about a few different resources that the Sacramento Public Library offers. We do have a virtual Zumba class on Mondays at 5:30, virtual Zumba Gold Wednesdays at 4, a virtual Reach and Read, which is a yoga and reading class Thursdays at 10 a.m. And as a library, we also have a ton of books available. We have books on mindfulness, cooking on a budget. We have Leanne Brown's cookbooks, including her new one, and a ton of others.
God, I'm loving that you said you have a lot of books available at the library.
Sometimes you have to put that out there, you know. We do a lot of other things too, but centering it on books is always good.
Of course.
I did want to amplify the Lunch at the Library program. It is the program that really led us to being here tonight. Lunch at the Library is exactly how it sounds. It's a program through the California State Library that allows the Sacramento Public Library to feed young people lunches throughout the summer at select locations. We've been part of it for many, many years. This year, the State Library had a component called the Lunch at the Library Innovation Grant, and we were lucky enough to receive it. And through that grant, we created a partnership with the Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services and Health Education Council. And with that, we were able to connect kids, families, and teens with nutrition education. Most importantly, we were able to provide on Fridays at certain locations boxes of dry food, and then also bags of produce like potatoes, plums, onions, amazing stuff. And it's been just the most gratifying thing to do this summer. We also were able to give away free copies of Leanne's beautiful cookbook, Good and Cheap. And when I learned about that, I thought I would reach out to Leanne and let her know what we were doing. And she was so excited about it. It's really what led us to being here tonight. We will be emailing you a survey after each session. It really is helpful to us to get feedback from you all on how we're doing and if you have suggestions for us. So we'll email you a survey with a link to the presentation and then also some other additional links for information that you might want to explore more for. So Leanne, we do encourage you to follow Leanne. We will be sharing these links with you in the email follow-up, but follow her on Instagram, join her newsletter. And then if you like what you're learning tonight, you also have the opportunity to maybe sign up for a 5-week cooking series she's doing this fall. We'll be sharing that link out also. Before I turn it over to Leanne, I did want to put out a disclaimer. This is Sacramento. This is July. We are aware that this recipe requires you to turn on your oven.
Turn on the oven.
I did it this weekend, and although it was hot, I can say wholeheartedly it was worth it. It was a delicious experience. If you don't want to, that's no problem, no judgment. I think you'll still have a great recipe to use when things cool down. So let me stop sharing. And Leanne, how are you?
I'm good. I am looking forward to it, but it's true that it is a bit of a sacrifice to turn on the oven. I am in Brooklyn, not Sacramento, unfortunately, but yes, it's going to make my house that much steamier. And so it has to be worth it. It's true. I hope it is.
It was absolutely worth it. Take it away. I'll be monitoring the Q&A throughout and pop in once in a while.
All right. So I want to talk about building confidence. I want to talk about saving money tips, all that stuff. But as Todd mentioned, this recipe, well, ultimately pretty simple. It's just some vegetables that are going to get roasted. They're going to like hang out in their own juices and lemon and garlic and get all delicious. And then we're going to put biscuit topping on top, and it's going to bake even longer, and it's all going to come together. But how that comes together does take a little bit of organization. So the really important thing that everybody should do now, if you're cooking along, is to take your half a stick of butter and put that in the freezer right now. Okay. So I'm going to do that. And I'm also going to turn on my oven, the horror of it all, to 425. Nice rip roaring hot oven. Here we go. So 425 degrees, wait for that to beep. And then I also have a baking dish. I think I said 8 by 10. That's pretty standard size baking dish in the recipe. What did I say? Yeah, 8 by 10. Huh, look at me. And so I'm using this one. Really, there's many sizes that could work. If you're using bigger ones, you're just going to probably cook the vegetables a little bit faster because they'll be a little further apart. If it's a smaller dish, they're going to be all jammed up together and they're not going to cook quite as quickly, and it's going to be a little bit more watery. So those are just two things to keep in mind. I've just oiled the dish a little bit. And because also we have to bake this for 25 minutes, and then we're going to make the biscuit topping, and then we're going to bake it for another 20 minutes. I really do want to sort of start getting the stuff in the oven. And then once it's in the oven, we'll have a little bit more time to talk and kind of get through any questions and tips and sort of thinking through the recipe as we're doing it, talking about the different elements and how they can be like helpful in thinking about budgeting or saving money, or becoming more confident, which is actually what this one's all about. So last week, let's grab ourselves, we have 3 zucchini, 3 to 4, I say. I've got 3 here, and then 3 large tomatoes. So I'm just going to start chopping. And we're going to get right into it. Last week, we talked about mindfulness. And mindfulness might not seem like the most important element of cooking, but it is really, really helpful, because when we're mindful, mindfulness is just a fancy way of saying being present and being focused on what's happening right now. And you might think, well, I am when I'm cooking. What's like, yeah, duh. But really, most of us, maybe right now when we're focusing, hopefully you're focusing on me, perhaps what's in front of you, and you really think, what's she gonna tell me to do next? And you are focusing right now, but think about when you're actually making dinner. Chances are, and like, I know I'm for sure this way, that it's like, oh, my daughter's chatting to me about something. I'll be thinking about some work stuff that I'm doing that I really wish I'd gotten done, or something I'm worried about, something I'm anxious about, and I'm not very likely actually paying attention to what's in front of me. And so the act of mindfully bringing yourself into just this does take some practice. And when we do that, that's when like magic really starts to happen, because it's right there when I can go, okay, I can actually start to make decisions. I'm noticing this. I'm noticing something really beautiful about the zucchini, which is that the moment I cut through it, I mean, it's so warm in my apartment. It's so hot and humid that it starts to sweat immediately. And it's kind of beautiful. It's like releasing all of this moisture. And you don't have to find that beautiful, but you might. And that's the beauty of doing this kind of cooking. When you're really paying attention, is you get to notice all of these gorgeous things about the whole process, not just the end result. And that's the other thing that helps us build confidence ultimately, because confidence is just it's a word that we use that really means trusting ourselves, right? Like being confident just means I trust myself to do whatever it is that I need to do. And so in this case, we're talking about being confident about making a meal, making a dish. And maybe more than just making this dish, I think what a lot of people are here for and what a lot of people worry about is like, okay, I can make maybe one or two things, but I feel like I'm not ultimately like a good enough home cook. I don't have enough things in my repertoire. I don't know how to make substitutions. I feel like I'm spending too much on groceries. There can be so many ways in which we may feel that we lack confidence or that we just don't feel like we know what we're doing, right? When it comes to cooking and meal making, which is a whole process. I mean, that's the thing. It's not just the cooking part, all of this lovely prep that we're doing now, which can be quite pleasurable. And I'm just sort of ordering these. I'm cutting them into bite-sized pieces. And I'm not doing it too quickly because I'm chatting with you. And that's what I'm teaching as well. So I'm just cutting off the ends of the zucchini. And then I'm going to just slice it into little discs. I can go quicker if we're hurrying. And again, last week, and I hope some of you are here from last week, that would be so lovely. Building on your skills is that there's a real pleasure to just quietly experiencing this. For example, the sound. That lovely sound of slicing through this. It's deeply pleasurable. And not only is it pleasurable, it's actually soothing. I can feel myself relaxing. And that actually reminds me, I usually recommend, but I rushed into things today because I want to make sure we get all of this in the oven. But I usually start all my classes with some deep breaths. So let's do that now, because I really couldn't recommend it enough. And it's a habit I think that I'd love for you to take away with you, which is to take just 5 deep breaths before you start. So let's all inhale together. 1 deep inhale, feel it filling your torso up completely. If it feels a little hard to get it all in there, that's okay. That's just how you are right now. And exhale. Let's inhale again. This time, maybe there's a little more room. Pause at the peak and exhale. And feel that breath just soothing your body. Inhale again. And exhale. And inhale again, this time inhaling all the goodness. Everything we want. And then exhaling, releasing any stress, any lingering worries, anything we just don't want there. Now, 1 final inhale. And exhale. Wonderful. And then the next thing that I highly recommend is to read through the recipe completely. And then from there to sort of get all your stuff in place. And then you can just relax. Because you have everything that you need. You know how to do it. You can check on it, and you can just actually enjoy the process. And the other way that you enjoy the process, and this is another really important element of confidence, is taking the pressure off yourself. we are not focusing on the end product. We are focusing on the process. Now we're going to have a final product. That's going to happen no matter what, but we're not going to stress out about getting it just right, making sure it's perfect, making sure more importantly, maybe that everybody likes it, that it just like is the ideal thing that everyone's going to love us for. We don't want to put that kind of pressure on ourselves for any particular meal. That's the oven that is ready, which is wonderful. And we don't want to give ourselves that kind of pressure, because then there's like a way to fail. And that's just such unnecessary pain that we're giving ourselves when we are saying, you know, I'm only going to be okay with this if it all turns out really well. It's this way for us to feel bad about ourselves when we aren't chefs in restaurant kitchens. We are home cooks. And what we're doing for ourselves, for our family, maybe for people that we have over, is like sacred nourishment. That's what we're doing. That is not a product. That is important, loving work. And we can appreciate and honor ourselves for that. And not judge ourselves, not choose to sort of say, ugh, this didn't turn out so delicious. I'm a bad cook. This is my fault. What we can say is, oh, I didn't particularly enjoy that recipe. What would I do differently next time? Would I maybe just not make that again? Or was there something about it that bothered me and maybe I could adjust? And then that's an opportunity to learn and grow, which is great, which is interesting, which is one of the wonderful things about being alive, about being a human being, is we get these nice long lives and we get to continue to change and grow and learn from our experiences. But for some reason, well, not for some reason, for so many of us, we learn at a very early age that it's not okay to get things wrong, that there will be consequences. Maybe we'll get a bad grade, or someone will be mad at us, or someone will be disappointed in us, or just someone will be critical of us. And that hurts. It really hurts when you've put effort into something for someone to be critical of that. I don't know if there are any parents here, but something that I know I've experienced and almost everyone has experienced is that our kids often don't like the food we make. And we can sort of internalize that as like this problem, either with us that we're bad cooks, or with the kids, like, oh, they're picky eaters, it's horrible. And when really, neither thing matters. We don't all have to like every meal in order for it to be good enough. In fact, it's like really not normal for everything to be like so incredibly perfectly pleasurable. And there's something just normalizing and natural about going like, yeah, sometimes we eat stuff that is just so, or even not that great. And that's totally okay. It doesn't take away from our efforts. And so learning, I think, to tolerate maybe our kids who might not be maybe as polite as some grownups, or sometimes grownups can be even worse, right? About criticizing other people's food. But ultimately, we want to work on at least not having this sort of external value of like what other people think, or even what we think of the final product. We need to appreciate our intention, which is to make ourselves a beautiful meal, to nourish ourselves. And that's what we can taste. That's what we can enjoy. And no one can take that away from you, right? That's what ultimately gives us strong confidence and self-trust, is we know we're doing our best. And that is everything. So I'm slicing the tomatoes, just into slightly smaller pieces. They're really juicy. I can feel the wetness on my fingers, and I quite enjoy it. And now don't even want to show you because it looks gross, but I have a bit of a bad spot on my tomato because, actually it's quite deep in there. Yikes. So this is a good lesson, actually. Good and cheap lesson, which is, you know what? It's the summer and I bought these tomatoes a day ago and I left them on the counter and one of them got a moldy spot. And that's okay. I can cut that out and still use it. And it's really important to try to work on not being so squeamish about stuff like that when it comes to produce or anything really. Well, produce in particular. I guess we don't really want to be eating things that have mold in general, but it's usually pretty easy to kind of cut that away from a fruit or vegetable like this. I could see it was just in one spot that it had gotten that. And then the rest is just fine. And in particular, it's fine in this case because we're not eating these tomatoes raw. They're going to be baking for a good long time in a very hot oven. So any sort of worries about bacteria or anything in it should be baked off, and it's nothing to worry about there. Because of course, if we're looking to save money on vegetables and we're eating, lovely fresh tomatoes that tend to be a little bit on the expensive side, zucchini less so, especially when it's in season. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there's always like somebody, especially in Sacramento. I mean, come on, you guys all have gardens. There's going to be somebody growing zucchini and trying to give you some. So that you're probably going to be able to get for free. The tomatoes, we of course want to make sure that we're able to use them. So much of budgeting at this time of year in particular is really trying to eat in season. And so it's summer, so we have so much fruit and veg to work with. And again, you guys are in California, so you have this wonderful extended growing season. But still, there are times of year when produce is cheaper and more plentiful. And those are times to take advantage of for sure. There's a joy in this summertime when we can just eat so much fruit and vegetables, whereas in the winter we might be eating, more lentils with onion and garlic and maybe some pepper and carrot instead of these summer vegetable experiences. I'm almost done with chopping up the tomatoes, and then I'm just going to add in the flavors. And the flavors tonight are lemon zest and garlic. And this is a place where you could absolutely try something different. You could add a different spice. Or you could skip the lemon or the garlic, though I highly recommend it. All right, we got all our tomatoes. Woo! This dish is so full. Incredible. I probably should have a slightly bigger dish, actually. But we're going to go with it. We're going to see how this goes. These are going to cook down so much. And then I have scallions. I am going to just cut off the ends. And get rid of any of these stringy bits. Any of the, these bits where you're like, that's not nice. It's too dry. It's gotten too crispy to eat. Get rid of all the yucky bits of your scallions. and then chop them. And I'm going to chop them quite fine. So that they can mix around, we can get a little bit of them in every bite. Get rid of that part. Wonderful. And so I just got rid of the very ends that are getting too tough, but I like to use, I know some people just use the white parts. That makes no sense to me. You should use as much of it as possible. It's all delicious. And I'm going to use a bunch of this, but I'm just going to reserve a little bit over here for the top at the end. So you have scallions in there. And I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 cloves of garlic. And again, here's a little technique thing. You take the flat of your knife and just scrunch down like this, and it will sort of pop the skin, the papery outside off of that. I'm blanking as to what that's called at the moment, which is funny. That one didn't work quite as well. Not quite as perfectly clean. And so the other thing, of course, that builds confidence is just little techniques like that. Just experience. It's so much of the people that I talk to all the time think they're these terrible cooks, and it's like, you're just inexperienced. There's no such thing. We all really deserve to enjoy the creative experience of cooking. And we all deserve to feel free, I think, of criticism in our own homes. But sometimes we're our greatest critic. That's the issue, right? So much I think of building confidence and building the self-trust is also being really kind and compassionate with yourself about where you're at. If you're someone who did not grow up cooking, didn't have a lot of modeling of that, and it's something that you're new to, you gotta have reasonable expectations of yourself. Please be kind to yourself. You know, I would never, like, I'm, learning about finances. Like, I've been like trying to learn more about like smart choices in finances lately, and I'm so new to it. And sometimes I feel so clueless, and it's like embarrassing, but I always try to remind myself, look, you just haven't learned this yet. This is something that you are like being brave about. You're learning something new. There's no reason to hold yourself to this standard where it's like, oh, you don't already know how to do this. It's like, we have to develop these skills, and it is a skill really of tolerating the feeling of not being good at something yet. And I should talk, like, I have kind of I have ADHD. And so for me, like, the feeling of like being too bored, or the feeling of like not being able to do something right away, just makes me so frustrated so quickly. I get really annoyed by it. And so I really had to learn how to not be frustrated with myself in my own learning process, because it doesn't help us at all. The more frustrated we get, it's like you won't breathe properly, you won't be present for what's happening, and ultimately you won't be able to learn, and you'll remember the bad feelings, right? Like, because that's the worst part, is that and the reason that mindfulness again is so important, and we need to have that as our first step. We need mindfulness and our ability to come into now and to just be right here, because I'm just going to grab some salt and pepper and olive oil. And then we're going to get this in the oven. Gosh darn it. A little bit of salt. Not too much. But maybe a little bit more, because this is really a decent pile of vegetables here. And then just a little bit more olive oil. I have quantities in the recipe itself, but I don't tend personally to make that many. I don't measure in general when I cook.
Hey, Leanne, could I ask
Yeah.
one quick question?
For
So
sure.
somebody wrote in, I noticed you were using a zester with sharp side down. I would have
Yes.
thought you to do the other way. What is your
Ooh,
reason?
yes. Okay. I'm going to get this in the oven and then I'll answer that. Okay. Ooh. Okay. I've got it in the oven and I've set it for 25 minutes. Great question. Great noticing. Okay. Now that that's in there, I'm like, we're good. We're going to have time for everything. It's going to be great. So basically it's like this funny, I can't remember. I would love to credit the person who taught me, but I have no memory of who that was. But it's a really nice thing for maybe not with Parmesan or something. You would like, it's easier to grate it this way, like some cheese, but with a lemon or a lime, it's really nice to do it backwards because then you can see exactly where, so right underneath, you can see the bright yellow zest coming up, and you can tell if you've like gone too far into the pith because it becomes white right away. So it's like, basically it allows you to just see where you're going and you can see it coming up, and then it's all there and you can just go boop, right onto your stuff instead of going like this and kind of moving it constantly and like slowly having it rain down. You then control the whole situation. So it's just a nice little technique thing as well. And thank you for noticing that so I could highlight it. I'm going to set this lemon aside and my salt and my pepper. And I'm going to clean. Oh, you know what? I just realized I didn't put basil in. I have all this nice holy basil. You know what? I'm just going to take it's because it's also looking like totally past its prime already. So I'm just going to grab a few leaves of it. This is neither here nor there. And again, this is great for you guys to see. It's so easy to just forget something and be like, oh no, I'm ruining it. It's fine. Especially this. Sometimes there are things that will, like if I completely forgot to put tomatoes in this, or if I forgot to put butter in the biscuit topping or something, it would be a problem. But for getting the basil, it's like a mild bummer. It's really okay. So I'm just going to grab this and sprinkle it on top. And we'll just get a bit of that basil flavor in, and I will maybe add some to the top at the end, and it'll be fine. But it's easy enough to forget things like that when you're not paying huge attention, or you're teaching a class and you're talking about a million things at once. And that's okay. Again, it's really okay. And I think almost any recipe worth its salt is going to be able to like deal with you missing the odd ingredient. So long as it's not the main thing, it will ultimately be okay. And I think that's another thing about learning, really learning how to cook and giving yourself grace, giving yourself a time period to understand, because in almost every dish, there's a few main components that are really important, and there's other things that are just kind of flavoring. And those are the things that you can be really flexible with. And if you're looking to save money, you can be really simple, really minimal with the things that you're putting into it, and just have like a little bit of, just have some garlic today. And like the flavor that we're working with this week is more garlic and lemon. And next week we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing curry. And so you can still have different flavors over time, but you're not sort of using so many small sort of expensive ingredients all at once. That's another sort of suggestion, is keeping things really simple will absolutely save you money. And it doesn't have to mean that you are missing out on life and you're not getting to have experiences. It just means that you're having more simple dishes and you can have different flavors at different time periods. So like from week to week kind of thing. Okay. So I'm going to give the butter just a bit more time in the freezer. And I'm going to get this bowl. And we're going to get 1.5 cups of whole wheat or all-purpose flour. I have all-purpose. So I'm going to take my 1 cup measure here. And it's definitely like best practice to pour out flour into the cup. That's what gets you the exact measurement. But this is my recipe, and I know it's just, this is a very rough, no worries recipe. And if the flour is a little off, it's still going to be just fine. So another 1/2 cup. This is not an ultra precision situation here. 1.5 cups of flour. 1/2 cup of cornmeal. This I am going to pour out because I can't reach. Wow. Okay. About 1/2 cup of cornmeal. 1 tablespoon of baking powder. Which is a lot, right? Like, oh my gosh, we want this to get nice and fluffy. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I have my cute little measuring friends here. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. Ooh. And you could totally skip the smoked paprika if you don't keep that around, if it's not part of your spice cupboard, you won't be disappointed. It's just nice in here. It's fun. I like having the smoky note with the little bit of cheddar. It just adds flavor. And it's nice to add flavor when you can, but also okay if you can't. And I'm just going to do a couple grinds of black pepper in here. And we're good. I'm just clinking away here. I'm making songs. And I'm going to whisk everything together just to mix in all the baking powder and the spices. I'm getting a blast of that, the black pepper and the smoked paprika. Woo! It smells fantastic, actually. And now I'm going to get some cheddar and grate that in here. So I'm going to eyeball this amount. I say about 1/2 cup. And so I'm just going to kind of eyeball. And I also know as a recipe designer, and I'm telling you this now, you can add more cheese. It's not going to make it worse. And you can add less cheese and you're just not going to taste as much cheese. It's just going to make it cheesier or less cheesy. This cheese is a flavor. It's not something that holds it all together. I think that actually, there we go. We came full circle back to my previous point, but that's the thing to be really gentle and self-compassionate with yourself about when you are learning to cook, is that you don't know what's important and what's not in a given recipe. That's something that you learn over time. It's like I think about my daughter learning to read, and she doesn't know like which letters, like we have all these silent letters, we have all these rules. She doesn't know which things are important yet about reading and which things you can kind of gloss over and which things you memorize. It's all new, it's all fresh, it's all confusing. We have to give ourselves time to learn these things. And have that sort of inner self-trust and that confidence to know that we can. And so confidence, I don't say, oh, the only thing that can make you confident is being good at something. Definitely not. I think that's so important that you can be a confident home cook when you barely know what you're doing, when you're just learning, because you need to have confidence in yourself and in your process and know that you can do it, and not to sort of say things like, oh, I'm bad at this. It's like, how are you bad at something you barely started? Nothing about that is helpful. I think we can be realistic about sort of our limitations and have self-awareness about where we're at, and not sort of say, oh, I'm bad at this, and take in all of that and then have this sort of black cloud hanging over us of like, oh my gosh, I'm just like not good at feeding myself, and all of those things that can start to happen and do happen for so many people. They carry around that like, I'm bad at this. It really makes me feel out of control, when we don't need to be experiencing that kind of thing. So now I'm going to take our very chilly butter, and we're going to take our box grater that we were using for the cheese. We're going to grate this butter into here. And some of you might be saying, what the heck is this technique? And I'm telling you, it's a great one. We're saving time. And we're getting a really nice result with biscuits. So this is a biscuit topping, meaning it's like a flaky pastry. And so with flaky pastry, we want to have basically small pieces of butter that have not been completely incorporated into the dough, because that's what creates the really nice texture of this flakiness. If we were completely incorporating it into the dough, that would be like a brioche bread or something like that, something that is a very rich dough, but it's not flaky, it's like fluffy and soft. But this is something where we want to have flakiness. And so using this box grater creates these little curls of butter very quickly. And I froze the butter on purpose, obviously, so that it will stay so cold. I'm getting all these curls out of here. So it stays so nice and cold, because that's the other thing. We have to have really cold butter so that it doesn't come incorporated into the dough. And then basically what I'm going to do is just with my hands, just cover the butter with the dry ingredients. And I'm not even going to try to mix it at all. And now I'm going to add the wet, which is just 1 cup of milk. And you could use an alternative non-dairy milk, by the way, if that's something that you prefer, like oat milk or something would be great. So 1 cup of milk, just going to pour it in, and I'm going to get back in there with my hands. Oh, it's very wet. And this is quite a wet one. This is a biscuit topping. I'm not making sort of individual biscuits. So all it has to do is come together. As you can see, it's almost becoming sort of reddish, well, pinkish, salmon colored from the smoked paprika in there, which I have to say, flinging dough at myself. Also part of the fun. But yeah, so there's lots of chunks of butter in here, but we have this gushy dough that is ready here. And so I'm just going to take it off my, oh my goodness, one of my hairs got in there. This also happens, does it not? So I'm
Hey,
going to take,
Leanne, we have a cheese question.
please, yeah.
Um, in the recipe, you call for sharp cheddar, and I think of an orange cheddar. You grated
Oh,
what looks like more of a white color. Is this
yep.
something different?
No, it's a sharp cheddar. I just always get sharp white cheddar. That's just what I do. I know cheddar is traditionally orange. For whatever reason, I grew up really not eating a lot of orange cheddar. And I just, yeah, no, white cheddar, orange cheddar, all good. Makes no difference. Orange cheddar is dyed orange. So it doesn't really matter if it's orange or not in terms of flavor. Do you have whichever kind you like? I do suggest getting the sharp cheddar though, because we're using a smaller quantity here for flavor. And if you use a really mild cheddar, you'll barely notice it in there. So I'm going to put this in ready to chill. I have space for this. I must. Wonderful. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is that until we have our vegetables come out, we are done. So that it's sort of like, oh my gosh, it seems like a lot, but actually now we're basically going to chill and we can
I,
chat about
I
all
do
kinds of things.
I do have another great question.
Please.
I was gonna save it for the end, but
I'm gonna while you're talking, I'm gonna just take some basil off of the stems and maybe add them in with the when I put the topping on. So please go on.
do you have any advice on making meals with what we had already instead of feeling the need to have everything that's in the recipes?
Absolutely.
I feel like whenever I cook something from a recipe, I always have to have all the exact same recipes before I cook. And it does get tiring because I can't move on without having the exact measurements and ingredients. The struggle is real.
So I so understand that. And I think thank you for bringing that up, because I mean, that's basically what I was just saying, was that I do think that is part of our learning process. And so for you, I would say it's just something to be aware of within yourself, that you have a tendency to really feel like you have to get a recipe exactly right. And I would just suggest that you honor yourself and that that's where you're at, but also push yourself a little bit gently, just to begin to notice, like what I was saying, which is to try to identify the parts of the recipe that are the main ingredients, things that we really need, and what are the flavorings. And maybe, because the things that we're using, like a teaspoon of here and there, I mean, not the baking powder, that's essential, despite being a small quantity, but like the paprika, like in this recipe, I would identify the lemon zest, the basil, the garlic, even the scallions, the black pepper, the smoked paprika, and even the cheese, all as things that you could completely skip, or you could change to something else, something sort of in that family. And so that's actually a really great practice that could be for you, would be to look at a recipe and notice, like, what are the flavors and what are the main ingredients? And to think about, just so that you're not having that experience that so many people have, which is they're going like, oh my gosh, I'm having to buy like so many different things, and it ends up so expensive, and I just use like a dollop for this one time, and I don't even know if I like the recipe. And it's like, yeah, before you commit to a big pot of gochujang paste, like wonderful Korean chili paste that I happen to love and I use all the time, it's like, if you maybe just need a tiny bit of that for a recipe, just skip it. And maybe get it sometime if you are convinced that it's something wonderful for you. But yeah, I would really recommend that practice, and to just be gentle with yourself, and maybe, not to skip like everything in it, but just to think about, like, if you're making a roast chicken, allow yourself to make a roast chicken that's flavored with lemon zest and salt, and let that be good enough. rather than, flavored with whatever kind of wild thing the recipe is sort of calling for, just to allow things to be simpler and just allow that to be an experiment that you're having of like, is this enjoyable? And then to notice, I think the whole journey of that experience is, which is what you said, which is like, oh, it's so frustrating that it takes me a long time. And then I feel like it has this standard and I've spent a lot of money on it. And so what you can notice is when you make something that's simpler, maybe you skip some of the elements or some of the flavors, that you feel like a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. Like maybe it's not as flavorful as the dish could have been. It's maybe not going to be, but you have another kind of satisfaction, which is that you didn't have to run out and get a bunch of stuff and make your meal experience that much more stressful or just take a lot of time. Because I think that's so much of what creates stress around cooking is actually all these things, like having to go shopping, having to, like, the organization, the decisions. We work so hard, all of us in our jobs and in our lives all day, making so many decisions that we have decision fatigue at the end of the day. And you're just kind of like, oh, somebody just like tell me what to do. And that can be, and so like minimizing your decisions and just appreciating simplifying it for yourself is such a kindness you can do for yourself. And I think that's confidence building, and that is pleasurable as well. You may not have the pleasure of like that bite that tastes like so heavenly, like you imagine it might from that recipe, but you're going to have something you're really satisfied with and you didn't have a tough time doing it. And that's such a gift to give to yourself too. So I think it's all about like kind of switching your mindset a little bit, if that makes sense. I hope that does. I know it may be a little bit hard to do all at once, and I do think it is a practice of learning what to skip and what to also sorry, I'm looking for my knife. What you can also substitute, and I know for this recipe, it's like a summer vegetable recipe. And so it's zucchini and tomato, but I suggest doing it with eggplant and tomato as well. It's so good. And there's summer squash, which is so similar to zucchini that you can do it with. There's really, you could do this recipe with any sort of melange of vegetables that you could roast, and it would be wonderful. And you could change the flavorings in the topping. You could take away the cheese, you could add different spices, you could try a different cheese in there, you could add herbs into there, you could add chives, onion into that. You could do them with just like a bunch of onion and let it all like get super caramelized, and then have biscuits on top. It could be like a French onion soup, like biscuit experience. There's so much that you can do. And if you're feeling that sort of creative energy, which is wonderful, then feel free to do that. But if you're wanting, that more like simple, straightforward, oh my gosh, I have it, I have the instructions experience, that is also good too. And I think we need different things at different times.
We have another question, and it's actually about last week's class.
Okay.
Can I ask a question that pertains to last week's class, tomato and spaghetti? Yes. Would like to know which tuna was used. I thought Leanne said there was no sodium. Thanks.
Yes, in mine, I just happened to buy a tin of no sodium added tuna. And so that's what I used. And I find that to be really nice if you can get the low salt or totally saltless canned foods, because then you add in the salt and you just have a bit more control. But it's fine. Anything, whatever you have will work. Just if it's a higher salt quantity, you just want to taste it and adjust based on that. Like probably don't add salt until taste it, add salt if needed, but chances are you won't even need it if it's already in there. But yeah, stuff like that, you can be so flexible with. If you have a can of tuna, you have a can of tuna, it'll be just fine. Either way,
And
you can add it, even you can have the kind that has just water or the kind that has oil, both will be great.
And another person asked Leanne, what was the brand name of the tuna?
I don't remember. I apologize.
I think if we rewatch the video,
I
I
could
can.
rewatch the video and like look at it. Yeah, but it was not something I did, unfortunately. But yeah, I wouldn't just get the tuna that works best for you. Get the, the best tuna that you can get, and let yourself be happy with that. How are we doing? 30 seconds till we see our bubbly vegetables. I'm excited. I'm going to grab my oven mitts, which are dirty and burnt looking, as all good oven mitts should be. Okay. Woo! Wow. Just gonna give this a little mix. So much juiciness happening. I'm gonna add in more of the basil. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. The lemon zest. Oh. Wow. I'm happy with that. Fun. And now I'm going to get our topping. And we're going to show you how kind of unprecise this whole thing is. This is unprecise. So we're going to do a blob here. A blob here. My oven's going to keep beeping at me. A blob here. And a blob here. And if you have a bigger pan, you're going to need to mix it out a little bit more. I'm just going to kind of try to cover everything. A little bit of biscuity goodness. And if you've got spaces in there, that's fine. Don't worry about that at all. It doesn't have to all be perfectly covered like this. This is just happening because I do have a smaller baking pan that I'm working with today. Okay. I'm going to put my oven mitts back on to get this in, and that's it. So you can see, just loop it on there, squish it down. All right, woo, 20 minutes. And now we can recover from our efforts, which is lovely. And we can talk a little bit more about all the wonderful things we're learning while we wait. But also just know that this recipe, the active time is not all that long. It's a fair bit of waiting. And this is something that you could, I wouldn't really recommend like making this and saving it for too long or freezing it. It's something to be eaten right away. It's definitely best on the first or second day. It doesn't keep particularly well because the biscuits get pretty soggy. So that's why I say this serves 4 like as a meal, but it could serve up to, I think it could serve up to 6. It's like a pretty generous serving. But yeah, make this and eat it the day you get it. Don't leave it too much, or it'll be a little bit soggy. It's not the best for keeping. A lot of things keep very, very well, but this just isn't one of them. It's one of those like peak summer dishes, and it's best to be eaten right away. Okay. Awesome. I feel we're doing very, very well. And I did want to just bring up again a few things that we could talk about in terms of saving money. And there are quite a few that are exemplified within this dish. The first one being eating seasonally. I think I mentioned, this may seem like something that has a lot of elements, but it's a lot of the zucchini and the tomatoes. You have this when they're in season. You wouldn't do this in the middle of winter if you're trying to save money, and it wouldn't be very delicious if you did. And same with the basil, the herbs, all of that kind of stuff. They can be more costly. That's why I don't actually have them in a lot of recipes in Good and Cheap. But when you do have them, when it is peak summer, when it is that time where maybe you're able to even grow them or get them from someone close by, using them heavily is wonderful. And if money isn't too tight, because this book, Good and Cheap, is built for a food stamps budget. It's really a very low budget, a frustratingly low budget. And so for many of us, we may not be working with a really low budget, but just trying to save money. When you're cooking at home, you're going to be saving so much money automatically if you are cooking more frequently at home. And so you can kind of splurge on herbs and just make sure that when I get them, I put them in fresh water, in fresh cold water, and keep them in the fridge like this. And this usually keeps them fairly well. Now, at the moment, it's just like, there's no keeping anything from wilting or getting a little bit sad because it's just so darn hot. So there's no fighting it, but that does tend to help. And so that's a really nice way to preserve your herbs. And use herbs heavily if you can afford to. They're wonderful. And then the other sort of aspect of this that can feel sort of luxurious, but ultimately is pretty simple, is the biscuit topping, which is made mostly with flour and cornmeal are the main ingredients, a little bit of cheese and butter. Butter is maybe a little bit more on the expensive side, but if we buy sort of a block of butter, and that's like the fat that we are using for a week, 2 weeks, depending on your family size and all of that, it can be used for so many different things that it ultimately is also pretty efficient and sort of good use there as well. So I just really recommend, when we're looking at our budget, thinking about things like that, thinking in terms of building up a pantry of staple ingredients that we tend to have around, things like lentils and beans and canned tomatoes and flour and cornmeal and things like that, that we will use again and again and again. And then maybe weekly, we're having to buy fresh vegetables and fruit and the things that we go through sort of more quickly, and the things that aren't as shelf stable. Those are going to be sort of the things that you're spending more on, and the things that you get a lot out of. They're obviously very nutritious and flavorful. And the other thing that I recommend, you may have noticed that this is a vegetarian meal, and there's a lot of vegetarian plant-based food in Good and Cheap. And that is, again, because it makes a lot of financial sense not to use large quantities of meat and dairy in your cooking, because they cost a fair bit, especially these days. They're very costly. And so it's not to say we have to get rid of them entirely, but to not use them as the center of the meal is going to be a really great way to save money over time. And ultimately to just eat in a way that I think serves our bodies a little bit better. I'm not going to in any way lecture anyone on how to eat healthy. That's so sort of not my role. I think it's for each of us to figure that out for ourselves, which foods make us feel good. But I know for me, eating more fruits and vegetables leaves me feeling much, much lighter, much happier, much more energized. And I like that feeling. And I sort of learned to cultivate an enjoyment of that good feeling over maybe the sort of pure, I don't know how to explain this. It's not like there's nothing wrong with it, but sort of like when you're biting into a burger and it's just like pure, it's like, oh, it tastes so good. But the taste is all of it. Maybe the actual experience of it settling into your body, at least for me, is not as pleasurable an experience afterwards. And so I've learned to sort of appreciate that afterwards experience a little bit more than the pure one in my everyday, which is not to say that I don't enjoy a burger from time to time, of course, but I just don't eat it all the time because it doesn't make me feel good, which is sort of the grown-up, mature way of experiencing pleasure sort of over time, which is just the pleasure of feeling good more frequently. All right. Does anyone have any more questions while we're waiting for stuff to bake? Because I can always keep talking about these subjects. I think they're infinitely fascinating, but I'd love to hear from you guys.
We not another question, but a comment. I love all the pictures and such on your fridge.
Well, thank you. I will have to tell the artist, my daughter, who is 6 years old, and yeah, wow, I actually should change them out more frequently. She's constantly making so many sweet things. I'm very, very lucky and loved mom, I must say.
One question I had, Leanne, when
Sure.
I made this on Sunday was, I was very nervous about the timing of everything because like I
Sure.
cut up everything and then the dough needed to be ready. How far ahead can you make the biscuit crumble? Like, is that something that's
You could make it far ahead, but I wouldn't. As you could see, like, you'll be fine to make it well. It's baking in the oven. It doesn't take that long. But you could make it a couple hours ahead of time and just let it chill in the fridge. Yeah, just make sure it's covered.
okay?
Yeah, you totally can, but you really don't need to. I think I totally know what you mean about that. And that's the thing about a recipe like this. It's like you do need to do it once. And then you do it once, you're like, oh, I can do it in that time. But the first time you read through it, you're like, oh my gosh, this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and it feels like a lot. And so I think that's the other thing. It's just another thing about like learning to cook is like when you make a recipe for the first time, it will take you twice, not twice as long. Maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it'll take you a lot longer than the next time you make it, like guaranteed, because you just won't have your like efficiencies down. But the second time you do it, you have confidence because you've seen how the process worked, you've experienced how the process works. And so the next time it will be totally fine, which is why it's so nice to start to actually not like make new recipes all the time, but to find one or two things that you really like. One or two, I mean, maybe a few more than that, but like say 5 things that you really like and learn them and learn, I would say within them, what you can be flexible with. Like say, for example, you're like, gosh, this savory summer cobbler is my thing. I love it. It's my new signature dish. Then do what I suggested and start like playing around with the vegetables and playing around with the topping so that it's like, you don't just make the zucchini and tomato version, you make all these other versions and you can enjoy sort of that whole experience. And you can learn just how flexible they can be. And you can like discover that you're actually brilliant at coming up with flavor combinations too, because that's the thing when you try something that's sort of out of your own mind, like within reason, which is going sort of saying like, okay, I'm just going to try different vegetables and see how it goes. There's something really exciting about that. And I've, talked to so many people who've experienced this where they're just like, oh my gosh, I made a huge substitution. I was so nervous that it wasn't going to work out. And then, it was really, really interesting or really delicious. Or even when it doesn't work out. I mean, that's the other thing. It's okay if it doesn't work out. But it's really exciting to try something that's sort of out of your own mind. And, oh, pardon me. I think that's only possible, really, realistically, to do once you have tried a recipe a couple of times. So just allow yourself that. And then, let yourself experiment, let yourself play, because it really is play. And that's a preview for next week when we're going to be making, we're doing zucchini, we're doing creamy zucchini fettuccine. And we are going to be talking about the experience, I think, of playfulness and self-exploration and creativity in the kitchen, which is also so, so important. It's all these like building blocks, I think, of confidence and of self-trust that we need to grow. We first need to show up, we need to be mindful, and then we need to allow ourselves to have our process, and we need to believe in ourselves. And then ultimately we need to just like let go and let it be fun, because it actually is fun if we let it be.
We've got a couple more questions.
I
One
love-
is, I have a question about a recipe my son tried a few weeks ago and remade tonight. It contains veggies, cut up sausage, and rice. The
Mhm.
rice was crunchy the first time. This time we tried adding water, but was still crunchy. What would you suggest we try next?
Well, I'm curious about how you're cooking. Like, was it already cooked rice and it like we're doing a fried rice kind of experience, or was it undercooked rice? I guess I need to be able to hear back from this person a bit more. Yeah, it's just a little hard to tell without knowing what the preparation was. If it's sort of a stir fry, I would say, yeah, you maybe got it a little bit too crispy. Although that sounds kind of good to me. I guess if it was vegetables, the way I would do it in my mind when you're
So
just
she, you want then? She wrote uncooked rice added into the larger pan, cooking on stove.
got it. And then you're just adding in the other stuff. So probably, yeah, it's just not enough water. So you'll need to add, I don't know what, if it's not giving appropriate quantities, I would look up on your package of rice, just like it usually says how much. It's usually with standard white rice, it's like 1 to 1. You want to use 1 cup of water for 1 cup of rice. And so maybe if if you're opening the lid because you're adding in all that stuff and the steam's coming off, that might not be enough. So you maybe would want to add a little bit more rice or a little bit more water, and you'll have more success with that. That said, it's also like if you're sort of adding things in and you're stirring, you may need to add even more water still. And it's sort of almost more like a risotto kind of a preparation when you're adding in that sausage and vegetables and they're, letting their juices come off. You might want to, yeah, maybe prepare that more like a risotto. Sorry, I thought I heard a sound behind me.
We've got another question.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for ages. But yes, I would say probably more water. I think there's a lot of ways that you could solve that problem, but it's a little hard to give you precise advice without being there with you.
Leanne used fresh basil. Can you sub dried? And what's the measurement fresh to
You
dried?
can sub-dried, but I honestly, if you don't have fresh, I wouldn't really bother. I'm not a huge fan of dried basil. I think it's pretty lacking in flavor. And if you like it, go for it. Like do a tablespoon. But if I personally think that dried basil just doesn't do a lot. And so I would just skip it.
Is it possible to make next week's recipe if I'm lactose intolerant? Are there alternatives for the dairy ingredients?
Let me think about that. For the creamy zucchini fettuccine, let me think about that. It's what? I'm trying to recall. I think it uses cream. So for sure you could use a non-dairy cream. I just wouldn't use a sweet one. Like don't use like coconut cream. What are I'm like blanking on? But yeah, you can use a non-dairy cream for sure, or a non-dairy like a non-dairy sour cream actually would be really good in that as well. And I think it's just butter and I'm hearing. Oh, it's looking so good. It's just the vegetables are bubbling so much that they're like flowing a little bit down the side and landing on the bottom of the oven, which is actually very exciting. And the biscuit topping is looking awesome. I'm kind of excited for you guys to see. But yes, definitely you can substitute the creamy zucchini fettuccine for sure. I think that would be just fine. I'm almost like, I'm gonna look it up now and try to think of what would be good substitutes, but for sure, I always want to offer that because of course we're all dealing with so many different sort of dietary needs. Oh, I'm having a hard time. Oh, here it is. Haha. Okay. Butter. Yeah. Substitute olive oil for the butter. And it's just a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. So I would use any not sweet, non-dairy cream, or a non-dairy sort of sour cream, or what's the word? Like anyway, that type of thing would be great. Yeah, a 1/4 cup of non-dairy sour cream would actually be really nice and just melt into there. Or non-dairy, like a soft goat cheesy kind of thing too, would work really, really well. Yeah, it's mostly the vegetables that have all the flavor, and it's just a little bit of cream at the end to kind of zhuzh it up and bring it all together and make it feel a little bit luxurious. So if you skip that entirely, that would also be okay, but it's nice to add in for sure. We're 2 minutes off. I'm excited for you guys because this is like a full big casserole situation. It's very satisfying. I think that's another moment of confidence that I've talked to so many people about, is that feel like taking a big meal and putting it in the oven. There's something, it like requires confidence, because you're going like, is this going to be okay in there? And I know for many people, I actually wanted to design just a one-off class that was like roasting a chicken for confidence, because so many people tell me that that's like this big moment for them, is when they realize you get a chicken and you literally just put like salt and pepper and maybe some olive oil on it, and you put it in a thing, and then you cook it, and that's it. You just leave it for that amount of time, and it's just going to be a roast chicken. It's like, yeah, that's actually just how it works. And there's this like moment of deep trust when you place something you work so hard on in the oven, and you trust that the oven's going to be nice to you. You trust that the person who wrote this recipe knew what the heck they were doing. And you can trust yourself too, because the other truth is you can check on it. It's okay. This isn't, a very special pastry or a flan that's going to fall if I open the oven door. You can check on it. And you can make sure that everything is going okay if you're feeling a little bit nervous. But there is something magnificently confident about putting something in the oven and just going to chill out and read or hang out with your family or whatever, and then just knowing that the oven is doing all the work. It is. Right now, it's so hot. I can hear every drip of vegetables gooshing down the side, sizzling on the bottom. And that's another tip actually with this, is potentially it would have been smart of me to place the tray on a baking tray so that any excess is sort of falling onto the cookie tray, instead of directly onto the bottom of my oven, which is annoying to clean. Woo! See? Wow. But let's have a moment of self-forgiveness for me for causing myself to have to clean my oven later, and instead move to this moment of profound gratitude and appreciation for this wonderful, wonderful looking meal right in front of us. And so, okay, I'm going to turn the oven off because I don't know if we talked about this, but it's summer and it's hot. And so I know that this is done, but if you're just sort of like, is it? Let's break into it and I'll show you. So here's the biscuit topping, and it's going to be wet, a little wet on the bottom because it's soaking up all those vegetable juices. But look at this, this is done. You can see it's fluffy all the way through, and then it's wet on the bottom from touching the vegetables, and that's just fine. That's going to happen. So mine took 20 minutes. If it was a little higher up, maybe it would take 25. That's all good. I'm going to grab this beautiful bowl. And this big spoon. And I'm going to have a hard time deciding where to go for some reason. Oh, steam. Wow. So all these vegetables underneath. Oh, it's a little tiny bit undercooked right there. So I might put that back in the oven for another 5 minutes because this section is a little bit undercooked, which is good to know. I won't make you guys wait around for that though. I'll put this back in the oven and we'll do 5 more minutes just to make sure this is completely baked through. But the vast majority of it is, it's just in this section where it's kind of fallen down. So it's nice that I was able to find that. I would just put that back, put this little piece back, and I'll put it in the oven. But this part is good to go. This is totally cooked through. And these are veggies, which are also wonderfully cooked through. It's way too hot to eat. I really want to taste it for you, but I don't want to burn my palate. So I'm going to wait. And I'm going to just prep this and turn my oven back on, as I mentioned. Yeah, and put this in for another 5 minutes just to get the biscuit totally done. But I've already showed you guys where we're at. And yeah, you got to do stuff like that sometimes. You got to check it. When I say in the recipe 20 to 25 minutes, I mean it. We don't quite know how long these things will take because there's so many little factors. How thick did you do it? How wide? How good is your oven? Or how consistent, not so good, but how consistent is your oven? So these things can make a difference. And it's totally normal and okay to have to make little adjustments like that.
Well, Leanne, thank you for a wonderful, do you have anything else you'd like to add about?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm great. I hope this was helpful for everybody. I'm excited to eat this in a few minutes once it cools down.
The same thing happened to me with I had to clean my oven also after, so.
Yes, maybe we should add that in as a note. Think about putting it on a cookie tray. No.
Absolutely. But I want to thank all of you for attending tonight's lesson. We will be emailing you, like I said earlier, a survey, and then also the YouTube link for the video if there's any details that you'd like to follow up with on it, and also some information about Leanne and an upcoming class that she's offering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love it if you guys filled out that. It's a wait list, but it's also a survey. So it's just so helpful for me to understand what are the things that you're really struggling with in your kitchen. Like, what is it that you really want to learn so that I can create the course that will really work best for you, because that's what I'm excited to do. So let me know. I would love that.
That's very, very, very. When is the class? Is it in
the class is going to be in October, and it's going to be it's a 5-week sort of cohort based class. So it'll be over 5 weeks, and we're going to be sort of culminating, I think, and I haven't completely set in stone because I am open to more information in the survey, but I think the last week is going to be sort of focused on that holiday cooking kind of experience. So we're going to like build our confidence slowly through these experiences. There'll be a different recipe or two every week that we will work with. And we're going to be sort of working through different experiences, culminating in the ability to make a meal, either host a meal, make a meal, or attend sort of a holiday meal without being so freaked out and so anxious. So that is kind of the idea. It's for those of us who maybe struggle with nervousness and don't feel like we're really particularly good cooks, have some sort of issues around cooking, to sort of learn, not just to feel confident, because that's the thing. It's not even just about feeling confidence, which is such a beautiful feeling, but actually to learn to feel good, to go from feeling like cooking is kind of an annoyance to something that you can look forward to in your day. And I really believe that that can be taught. It's not just something that I innately have because I'm lucky and I am into cooking. It's something that is a practice that I've cultivated and that I've learned how to trust, and I can teach you how to love cooking. And wouldn't that be nice if there was a chore in our lives that can become something that we like. So that's the goal, is to really transform our relationship with cooking over that 5 weeks, and to do it in community as well, because there will be a group that we'll be following along with, and we'll have check-ins in between, we'll have journaling, we'll have sharing about what our experiences are like, what we're working on, what came up, what was hard, what was maybe easier, all of that kind of stuff, so that we can all kind of grow as a community and go through the transformation together.
Very cool. There were two comments. I think that they're a great way to close out.
Yay, and
So
this is
one is so excited to eat this tonight. Thank you. And
yay.
please share the photo with us. We'd love to see it on SAC Libraries, Instagram, or Leanne's. We'd love to see your work. And then this is, I think, just a great way to close out, which is, I'm feeling so much more confident with cooking and enjoying the process. Look forward to being more creative and increasing confidence. So
Yay. Oh, I'm so happy. That makes my entire week, actually, that you're feeling that, because I think so much of the time it's, yes, the skills and the experience, and also it's just giving yourself permission to be confident, man. You deserve to be confident. We all do.
well, thank you all. I'm going to stop the webinar, but have a great night, and
Bye. I'll
thank you
see you next
again.
time.